Kyle, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you here because you work as the tech career coach. You help people find jobs that they love and enjoy. And you worked with over 1,000 people one-on-one, which is really incredible, right? So you were speaking to CTOs, you know what they struggle with. And this is exactly what we are going to talk about. And not just what they struggle with, but also how to overcome those challenges, right? So welcome
Yes,
to
I'm
the show.
yes, I'm excited to be here today and speaking with you and to the audience.
Awesome. If you think about some of the recent people you've been coaching, what's the one thing that really helps them to get the job they love and enjoy?
I find networking and leveraging relationships is one of the most helpful pieces when targeting C-suite technology roles. And it's one of the biggest struggles. A lot of CTOs are like, oh, the idea of networking, putting myself out there, building relationships, that does not sound fun. Even though they know it works, they know that's how jobs are landed. It might even be how they landed their job. But the idea of doing it again, especially if they've been in their role for a number of years, haven't job searched for a while, it's something that's not appealing.
Yeah, it's totally my case. I'm also the introverted guy who likes to touch the keyboard, but not really go out there and shake hands with people who I don't know. So how to overcome this uncomfortable feeling of this insecurity and everything that comes with it?
Yes, as a fellow introvert, I can relate on the Myers-Briggs. I'm a 15 out of 16 introvert. I prefer one-on-one conversations over kind of ongoing networking or going out to events. I think part of it is stepping outside your comfort zone and getting used to that and practicing. I think of it like writing with your opposite hand. If you write with, for me, I'm right-handed, so if I write my name with my right hand, it's going to feel natural and normal. And then if I switch hands, it's probably not going to feel as comfortable, but it's going to be maybe somewhat legible. And then if I keep practicing over time, I'm going to get more used to it. And the same goes for networking. That first time you reach out to someone, it might feel uncomfortable, it might feel awkward, it might feel strange. And then as you get used to it and practice, you're like, oh, this actually isn't as difficult. Maybe by the 10th time I write with that opposite hand, or the 10th time I reach out to someone, you're like, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe it gets a little tiring because you're not used to it. But as you keep practicing, you get more used to it and it gets easier with time.
Mhm. And then what would be the best way to reach out to someone? Is it LinkedIn, just a cold message, or is it better just to go to some networking events? What would you suggest?
I'm a fan of stepping outside your comfort zone a bit. However, the caveat is to use what's already working. So if you're someone who already spends a lot of time on LinkedIn and engaging on posts, or maybe you have a big network there and over time you've added people at your companies, you can use LinkedIn. One of my favorite ways to use it when looking for a job is to go through and say, hey, let me go through my contact list and see who I haven't connected with recently or chatted with recently and reach out to them. My other thing is you can literally pull out your phone book on your phone, or your contact list, I guess is what it's called now, and go through and say, hey, let me go reach out to people and let them know that, hey, maybe in 6 months my company is being acquired, or I'm thinking about looking, and starting to have conversations with people. So doing those things that might feel a little uncomfortable, but are still somewhat within your comfort zone and are those low-hanging fruit you can reach out to. If you're someone, maybe you're a more extroverted CTO, or the idea of going to a networking event is appealing, you could do that. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. You won't find me at a lot of networking events. I like the one-on-one. I love LinkedIn, so I use it to network with people. But I would see, is there already a system in place where you have all your contacts or a lot of people, and then you can start reaching out to them and letting them know you'll be on the job hunt soon.
Hmm. And then what would you tell those people who you meet, for example, during the networking event? Usually there is just very limited time to talk about something meaningful. It's usually very shallow. So
Mhm.
what do you say? Like, hey, I'm Kyle and I do coaching. Is it not too salesy? I mean, especially here in Europe, people are not really presenting themselves with excitement.
Yes, I think you want to be mindful. You don't want to just say, I'm looking for a job. Can you help me find a job? I find that's a common mistake people make, is just putting it out there. I think it's similar to dating. The moment you meet someone, you don't want to say, hey, I want to go on a date with you. Instead, it's getting to know them, maybe the company they're at or the industry they're in. And then what I love about networking events is instead of having the goal of, I'm going to go really deep with a bunch of people, you could do that. You could use that as a way to learn about more people who are out there and say, hey, I want to build my network out here. And then let me follow up with them. A lot of people think of a networking event as kind of a standalone event. By the end of it, I need a job, or at least I need to apply. And instead, I like saying maybe it's a launching off point where you say, I'm going to meet 5 or 10 new people and then set up a follow up with them. I'm going to say, hey, it was really great meeting you at this event, Bob. Um, I loved learning about the work that you're doing at Airbnb in Europe. I'd love to set up a coffee for next week. And then over time, you can get to know them, similar to dating. You're not just diving in, but instead you're getting to know them. Maybe you don't even like Airbnb, or maybe their infrastructure is one that you're not interested in, or the reverse. You may over time learn more about them and say, hey, yeah, it sounds like a really interesting culture. I'm looking for my next role. Can you tell me a bit about the hiring process and the interview process at Airbnb?
Hmm. And this actually comes with another question, like how to know who to connect with, because it could be the recruiter, headhunter, it could also be the HR person or a CEO, C-level executive. So if you think about the networking strategically, who would you suggest to start connecting with?
So it's quite different when you're at the CTO, when you're going for CTO roles, when you're at the C-level. You're going to really want to focus on those decision makers and those people who are gatekeepers. So it's going to be that headhunter, often for C-level roles. That headhunter may be external. So knowing the difference between, are they using an internal headhunter or recruiter, someone employed by the company, you can reach out to them directly, or if it's an external agency. So it might be an agency that's hiring for quite a few different companies, reaching out to them. You can also, like you said, go to the CEO if the CTO is reporting directly to them, or the COO, or just anyone else at the C-suite level can be really helpful, even if there's someone that maybe isn't directly interacting with this person every single day in this future role you'll have. Still learning from them and saying, hey, can you tell me about the CEO? Can you tell me about the culture of the board? I want to learn more about this organization. And then using that relationship to then get an introduction to that headhunter, that recruiter, or the hiring manager. The key here is to really leverage those relationships.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. And it reminded me one of the recent networking events that I attended. And there was one person like super confident, like he was like, yeah, we are supplying people for IT companies. And he was like super confident, very present. And then I was just next to him, and we also, deliver the human resources for IT projects. We do recruiting as well, but I was not as confidently presenting our services. So kind of how to go from, yeah. And by the way, the important takeaway was that he filled like 5 roles over the last 2 years, so like nothing, right? On the other side, with my colleagues, we filled over 100. So I should be the one really confident, not him, right? But the reality was different. So how to kind of overcome this, especially as I mentioned, here in Europe, people are probably not as actively selling them on the market.
I think part of it is knowing your audience. I would be curious if your audience reacted better to him or to you. Knowing that you filled a lot more roles, it's possible your audience reacted better to you and liked someone that's maybe a little more humble. Other thought is practice. It's just practicing talking about yourself. It's not a skill that a lot of us are used to. In the United States, debatably, people are a little more used to talking about themselves. But even here, a lot of my clients aren't used to talking about themselves. At the C-suite, you're leading a lot of people in initiatives where it's a group effort. So a lot of people will talk about work using the kind of royal we and say, oh, here's what we did, or here's what my organization did. But then when I ask them questions about themselves, it's uncomfortable. So I think part of it is just practice and getting used to it and literally practicing aloud. So CTOs love writing and taking notes, I find. This is a generalization, of course, but not just writing out a bunch of elevator pitches or talking points, but actually saying them aloud every day and getting your reps in, even if it's 5 minutes a day in the shower or when you wash dishes or maybe on a daily walk. getting used to just talking about yourself aloud is really powerful. And then getting some feedback from someone else, someone who talks to a lot of CTOs. I talk to CTOs almost every day. So when people talk to me, I'm like, hey, I've actually heard this a lot. Like a phrase I really don't like, not that I dislike it, but it's something that's just shared a lot is, oh, I'm really great at communicating technical concepts to non-technical audiences. Okay, that's great, but what's unique about you compared to every other CTO that can also do that? And finding things that are then unique as well, which pushes you further out of your comfort zone, but will help you be memorable and speak with more confidence. If you say, hey, here's 2 or 3 things that are different about me compared to other CTOs.
Hmm. This is a very interesting point, and it probably gets us closer to the personal branding itself.
Mm-hmm.
So, how, this is really cool. I mean, how do CTOs position themselves? Because, CTO is a role, or it's a role in a team, but a person can position himself or herself as a CTO in a fintech company or CTO with fintech experience, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe there are some other ways how to improve the branding. So what would you suggest, how to even think about the positioning?
What I would consider is 2 things. One is to look at the types of roles you're looking at and say, what are they looking for? Are they consistently looking for people with startup experience? Are they looking for people with a technical background who started as engineers? First, start there and make sure. I think of that job posting or that job description as a recipe card and saying, they're looking for ABC. I at least need to have ABC in my elevator pitch or in my talking points when I talk to people. Otherwise, if they're looking for someone with engineering background and you don't have that or you don't talk about it, it's going to be hard to sell yourself. But then once you have the ingredients, you want those extra ingredients that set you apart. If every single person just mentions ABC, then you're just going to sound like every CTO. So it's figuring out those unique ingredients that set you apart. And a lot of CTOs that I talk to, they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about myself. So one way is to survey, think of it like a mini 360. Ask some people around you, your direct reports, your CEO, your executive peers, what's unique about me? What's different about me? And oftentimes when I have people do this, especially my CTOs, they're often surprised what people say because very rarely do they say their technical skills or that they're a great engineer. It's some other piece. And they're like, oh, I never thought about that. And then you can weave that in when you talk about yourself, and it'll help you stand out. So maybe you're a CTO that's really great at presenting and storytelling and selling a technical solution to people because of your storytelling skills. And then talking about that when you talk about your personal brand will help you stand out and be memorable.
Hmm. So would you then suggest the person has, for example, on LinkedIn, in the headline written CTO with the great presentation skills, or something like this?
Exactly. I think you can share that and say using storytelling to guide startups through whatever process they're going through and really highlighting that, but then not just saying that's who you are, but also having evidence and examples and some results ready of here's how I've used my storytelling skills as well. But I think LinkedIn would be a great start. On your resume. You want some examples. And then when you're networking and interviewing, you should be ready to share examples as well.
This is very cool. And do you have some other examples of how some of your clients, for example, went from the very generic role of a CTO to having something more juicy?
I think what's interesting is your experience. A lot of times people will have experience, but not connect the dots. So, for example, I realized with a client, I'm like, these 4 different companies were startups and you took them through really rapid growth, but they never mentioned that anywhere. I had to connect the dots. And if I have to connect the dots, the interviewer has to connect the dots. So I think what's key is for you to go through and say, what are the themes here? And oftentimes CTOs expect other people to be perhaps as capable of connecting the dots as them. And not everyone's going to do that, especially if they're just reading a resume for 8, 10, 15 seconds, or your LinkedIn, or maybe interviewing you for 15 or 30 minutes. They're not always going to connect the dots. So you doing that can be really powerful. Maybe at the top of your resume or at the beginning of your interview saying, hey, I took 3 companies from startup to IPO. Oh my gosh, that's really powerful. So just connecting those dots really quickly, giving that headline or that sizzle reel can be really powerful as well.
It's a great point. I've seen several examples where people mention, for example, that they had an exit after they
Mhm.
went public or some company acquired their business. So that's the kind of obvious showcase, and then there is pretty much nothing else usually. So it's very interesting, that you can showcase some other aspects of the experience.
Yeah, and I think what's key there is what sets you apart from other people. Okay, great, you had this exit, but a lot of people have had exits. What's unique here and really highlighting that is what's most important. And I encourage people to keep drilling down, maybe um, doing the 5 whys. Okay, why is that important? Why is that important? Why is that important? And really drill down there about what's unique and different about you, and keep doing that over and over until you run out of items, and have a list of 10, 20, 30 things that are fabulous about you. And some of them you may not love, but choosing the top ones and then sharing those. Because a lot of times people say, I don't know what's fabulous about me. And my one rule as a coach is I don't allow people to say I don't know. It keeps us stuck. So to really just keep digging there. And again, if you get stuck, survey some people around you and then share those fabulousness pieces throughout your survey.
Now, when you say the word fabulous, I realized it's your favorite word. You wrote it somewhere on
Yes.
your LinkedIn profile. And you also mentioned you like Starbucks and Disneyland. Like, is this intentional? Like, do you reveal some of these personal, completely irrelevant, things from your personal life? Like, is this something that you deliberately put on the profile to make it more appealing?
I would say no and yes. I think part of it is just part of sharing myself, and humans connect with other humans. But I also love branding and marketing. If I wasn't a career coach, I think I would be a publicist or a marketing executive or a branding executive. And people remember those little details, the Disneyland piece, the Starbucks, the coffee. And I think as a CTO, you want to do that as well. Like, people are going to be speaking to a lot of folks. How are they going to remember you from someone else? It's not going to be this exact technology you did. It's going to be those more personable things. And then connecting the dots. For me, why I talk about Starbucks, part of it is just I love coffee, but then part of it is I love the branding and the marketing of a Starbucks and how they've convinced people to spend 7, 8, $10 on a coffee that they customize. And it's similar to the executives I work with. We're working on their branding, their marketing, that development of something that's really bespoke and different in a saturated market, and being able to connect those dots. So I think for you to think, if you're listening to this, what can I do that can differentiate me from everyone else out there?
Mhm. Now, when you say it, I have a little flashback because with some of the clients, for example, I mean, sometimes it's hard to mention the name of the candidate, right? Like you don't recall, but with some of the clients, we exchange like, hey, the candidate who worked at Google, or you
Yep.
remember the candidate with the blue car or whatever, like these things stuck in your mind, even if you don't recall the name of the person or any details. So I guess I will also remember you as the coach who likes Disneyland. So
And
it
I
must
ask
work.
clients, what do you want to be remembered as? Do you want to be the person who blank? And to ask yourself, how are you sharing that throughout? And some clients are like, oh, I'm just the CTO. Well,
Mhm.
everyone's just the CTO if they're applying for a CTO role. So, what are those things that people are going to remember about you? And if you, as the interviewee, the person going for the job, can't answer that question, they're definitely not going to be able to answer that question if they have 40 or 60 or 80 meetings a week.
Wow. And then how to discover this thing? I mean, you like Starbucks, so now it sounds obvious, right? But a lot of
Mhm.
people like Starbucks as well. So how is this differentiating? Some people may wonder.
Yeah, I would ask people around you. Everyone I talk to is like, Kyle, your brand needs to be coffee. You love coffee, you caffeinate people's careers, those sorts of things. I think it's also weaving in the fabulousness. They're like, Kyle, it's really, you encourage people to stand out, own what's fabulous about them. So if you're not sure what's kind of unique or different, I would survey quite a few people around you and see what they notice, what they pick up on. And also, if there's a trait you're like, oh, I really want people, I'm a CTO, but I'm really great at cross-functional collaboration. And you survey 10 people around you and none of them say cross-functional collaboration, that might be something to be mindful of. But I would talk to people around you and see what they say about your personal brand. For me, it's coffee. The other thing is questions. Everyone says, Kyle, you ask really great questions. You get people to really think and stop and pause and reflect and have new insights. So throughout my website, I try and ask a lot of those questions and get people to think and reflect and have aha moments. When I talk to people, that's my goal. So I think doing that survey can see how close or far apart you are from your personal brand and if it needs some adjustments.
And I guess it often needs some adjustments, and often the person is somewhere today but wants to get to another point, much better high-level profile in a year or so. So how to go from where you are today to where you want to be in a year? Of course, you can interview people as you just suggested, but how to know you have a good brand already? Like there is no benchmark, there is no certification, it's just something you make up at some point.
I think a few things. LinkedIn is another thing you can do a little differently here, is doing some, I'm not sure I love the word competitor, but some market research will say, in finding people on LinkedIn who are in the role you want. So let's say there's some company or a type of company, maybe a mid-sized fintech company you want to be the CTO of. I would go find 10, a dozen, 20 CTOs at mid-sized fintech companies on LinkedIn and see what does their personal brand look like? How are they talking about themselves on LinkedIn? What podcasts are they on? What publications are they getting produced in? What conferences are they speaking at? And lay that out in a spreadsheet or Asana or somewhere and see how do you stack up compared to them. And oftentimes clients will come to me and say, do I need an MBA, Kyle? Or do I need to be speaking on stages? Or should I be a member of this? And I say, let's go do some market research and let the data tell us. You're a CTO, let's have the data tell us whether you should be doing this or not. And that can be really powerful. Since there isn't a standard rubric, you have to go see who your competitors are, what the market is looking for in a CTO, in your target industry, in your target role, at the types of companies you want to work for.
This actually reminds me one of the CTOs I've been also working with. He was thinking about enrolling in a master's degree, like yet another one, which would cost lots of money and probably not get the desired result. So you just talk about personal branding. We discussed networking, and people may wonder whether to enroll in some university or some other degree. So what do you think, based on your experience, yields best results? Is it the first thing or second or third or something else?
I think it's a combination of all of them. I don't think it's kind of one or the other. I think part of it's personal branding, part of it's networking, part of it is continuing to grow yourself. I think it's targeting the right roles. I think oftentimes that's not just one thing, it's continually optimizing. And the CTOs I work with love that. It's let's look at each kind of, I think of it like a pipeline, the job search. There's looking for the right roles, there's working on your resume on LinkedIn, there's networking, there's interviewing, us going through the pipeline and saying, how do we keep optimizing each item? None of them are going to be at 100%. That's not realistic, but us going through and optimizing each one. And then if you feel yourself getting stuck, maybe you're not getting interviews, or you're just getting recruiter calls, but not moving to this hiring manager interview. We can see where you're stuck in the pipeline and optimize, optimize, optimize.
And it's very cool that you mentioned the job search itself, because a lot of people may not have any experience looking for a job for the last 5 or 10 years because they had a great job and everything changed over the last 5-10 years. So it's really interesting to see all of these different stages and the optimizations as you suggest. Awesome.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's tricky. A lot of CTOs haven't looked for a job for a while. And I think what's important is to not just let me go on Google and find a bunch of stuff or go on TikTok, but to really make sure the advice you're following is tailored to C-level executives, tailored to tech executives. Because there's a lot of advice out there, but it often doesn't serve CTOs. It might say, just have a one-page resume. Well, that doesn't work for CTOs typically. So really making sure what you're reading and what you're learning is specific and focused to tech executives, since the job search looks so different at your level.
Well, now when you mentioned this one-page resume, I just recalled one that was just with such tiny font in 3 different rows. Everything was just so squashed, and I guess the person was just reading this advice somewhere. Put everything on one page, like completely unreadable. So I don't know where people get this.
It's out there. There's just anyone, it's not regular, at least in the United States, the coaching industry, giving advice isn't regulated. People can say anything. So it's really important to know where you're getting your advice from and know that that person's an expert in tech executives and personal branding and getting them jobs. Because you have to remember, if it's like a bell curve, CTOs at the high end, you think there's not a lot of people going for those roles. These are really niche roles. So your advice is going to be different than what applies to mid-level managers, to entry-level engineers. So your job search is going to have to look different as well.
Awesome. So we discussed personal branding, networking. What about the headhunters and recruiters? They also have significant impact on who gets the job, but who can someone who is just proactively kind of thinking about the job change, but not yet looking actively. So what do they do? Should they start reaching out to headhunters, connecting with them, but also they don't want to sound too desperate, right?
I would say exactly that. Reach out to a few headhunters and recruiters and saying, hey, I'm just casually looking. I want to let you know. You can reach out maybe every 3 months, once a quarter, and let them know, hey, I just want you to be aware that I'm passively and confidentially job searching, and I want you to be aware. Here's my most up-to-date resume, and keep them just aware of where you are and check in regularly. Because you never know when opportunities may come up. At the CTO level, they're a lot less frequently coming up, and there's just fewer of them as well. So keeping them just up to date and where you are. And then if your situation evolves or changes, you can say, hey, now I'm more actively job searching. But just reaching out, keeping them up to date is most important.
Well, it almost feels like a part-time job or maybe even a full-time job with all I can now imagine a spreadsheet where you keep track of which headhunter you reached out to, which could seem like fun, but probably is not for too many people. So is this service also something that you help your clients with? Is this something that people can reach out to you?
I encourage people not to make their job search unless you want to. I don't think the job search has to be a full-time job. It's really about focusing on those key things. And yes, I help people really optimize their job search, focus on the key areas, and make sure they're targeting the right companies, that their documents are updated and optimized, their LinkedIn's optimized, how to look for a job if it's 10 or 20 years, how to interview, how to negotiate the salary, start to finish. I support people with that process.
Awesome. And if people would like to get to know you and connect with you, where can they reach out?
Yes, you mentioned my website, caffeinatedkyle.com, and then I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. It's Kyle Elliott with 2 L's and 2 T's.
Caffeinated Kyle, I guess, the coffee everywhere. It's in Starbucks.
Yes.
Awesome. So is there any kind of final advice that you would like to give to fellow CTOs who may not be looking for a job just now, but they are looking ahead and they may wonder, hey, what's going on maybe in 3 months, 6 months, in a year? So what would be your best advice?
I think if you're looking for a job in 3 months or 6 months or a year, now is the best time to slowly start planting those seeds, to start building out that list of recruiters or headhunters, start reaching out to your network and letting them know so you can plant those seeds, because then those seeds take a little while to grow. Some of them might not, nothing may happen. Other ones you have to water and revisit. So I would start now and start slow and just keep visiting and revisiting and revisiting. So this is a great time to start. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to speak with you, but I would start now. It's always easier to start now than when you actually need that job.
Yeah, so true. It could be too late by the time you need the job right here, right now.
Exactly. It takes a while. There's a number of steps, especially at the executive level when looking. So it's easier to get a head start.
Awesome. Great. Well, then thanks a lot for sharing all the insights about personal branding, networking, and connecting with recruiters.
Of course. Thank you for having me.